I learned early in law school, in order to be successful at anything when you're new to it, you need to fall on your sword. You need to admit to everybody that you are new, you do not understand, and you're here to work hard and learn.
One thing I learned last year of medical school is that you got to stop comparing yourself to the people around you. There's always going to be someone better than you. The only important thing once you get to graduate school is focusing on how much knowledge can you gain in the short amount of time that you have to study and learn so that you can do right for your patients, for your clients, for the people that you're going to be interacting with once you're out in the real world. Medicine,
Law, friendship. This is Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. You're listening to the Medico-Legal Brief.
one doctor, one lawyer, and a whole lot of gray area.
Welcome back, everybody. We have Dr. Long. I'm Lawyer Nik. If you haven't already, please look us up on YouTube and Spotify. Subscribe and follow. Look us up on all the other social media platforms. We really appreciate it, and it helps our channel. So with that being said, Long, how was your weekend?
Weekend was good. I'm trying to think of what I did. We were on our trip back from Canada, which we got back pretty late on Saturday night. And so Sunday was recovery day.
Any problems getting back into the United States with the kiddo?
There was a little bit of delay. And the funny thing is we flew from Vancouver. The layover was in Detroit. So we actually flew past Wisconsin, landed in Detroit, but we landed late, like 30 minutes. And we had only had a 50-minute layover planned. So we were already 30 minutes behind. Well, someone on the plane actually reached out to us and said, don't worry, Detroit airport is pretty small. Everything's clumped together. They could not have been more wrong. We got off the plane. I think we were on gate C or A, and we had to get to the opposite. It was far. Like you had to take a tram. And even if you took the tram, it was like a 5-6 minute tram ride. So imagine having to run that. And that's what we did is we ran that entire length. And yeah, terrible.
Anytime I hear stories of that, it always reminds me of Home Alone 2 when they're running through O'Hare and then he ends up getting lost and gets on the wrong flight. And we've both been in O'Hare multiple times. You just have that vision of like the flags there and then running down the terminal area. It's just stressful when you're about to miss a flight. It's like one of the more stressful things.
Running by yourself is fine. With your luggage, fine. But imagine running with your luggage and a kid in your arm. Like that's what was happening. And then we have two kids. So one of us had to just push the stroller and the other one had to get the luggage and the other kid. So it was a very stressful time. How was your weekend, Nik?
It was good. We ended up going to the Pregnancy Expo and getting a lot of free stuff. It's actually incredible. So the expo, I think last time I mentioned that it might be in Irving. It was actually in Frisco, which is the northern Dallas area. We walk in and I've never seen so many pregnant women all in one place. And I've never seen so many men looking like pack mules because they give out free bags at every single booth. Every single booth has a bag filled with coupons and swag and merch. I had to make multiple trips back to the car. It was fun because being able to actually put your hands on some of the baby gear was awesome. So we were able to pick out the stroller because the stroller that I was leaning towards was there. So we were able to solidify that. We found new brands for wipes and diapers. And, there's another brand that sends you free diapers just because it's part of their cause. We got to learn a lot and we got a lot of good education and good info. It was very fun. But at the end of the day, I was absolutely exhausted from just walking around looking at everything.
Sounds like it. So is that something that you have to pay for to get in, or is it free to the public to go?
So it was, I think, $20 a person. My wife found like a coupon code because she's savvy like that. So it was $17 each. And literally this is the way my wife is. She will go and she will set out all the free product and then look up the free product to see how much the free product costs to make sure we got our money's worth. So she ended up getting something from the brand Mom Cozy. And she looked it up and was like, okay, this costs $13, this costs $15, and this costs $20. We made our money back. This is wonderful. And I was like, all right. So I highly recommend anybody, if there's a pregnancy expo and you're pregnant and you want some free swag and some free gear, definitely go check one out because the stuff that you get in return definitely covers your cost of entry.
Nice. And I'm sure it comes with like coupons so that you purchase more things from the company, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then free raffles. Free coupons and coupons that you can't find anywhere else where it's this pregnancy expo only 50% off. And of course it convinces you to go buy things. I really enjoyed it. And I thought it was really educational. Talk to some of the brand ambassadors and see what is up with their product, whether it's good or bad, and be able to get the honest responses, or at least you hope honest responses.
Sure. Well, great. We should get started on our topic today, which is going to be imposter syndrome. That's something that we all struggle with at least once in our lifetimes. Anyone that says that they've never had imposter syndrome is probably lying to themselves. Don't you think?
I think so. I feel like I didn't hear the term imposter syndrome until maybe the last 5 or 6 years. But when you throw out the definition and you describe what it is, I feel like we've had imposter syndrome at some points in our life since we were probably children.
Totally agree. Same thing from my perspective is I don't think I've heard the term until I became a professional. After I graduated medical school, or really when I started medical school, is when I started hearing about what imposter syndrome was. And then you're right, you start to think about, well, imposter syndrome went as a different name, or I guess something more layman's that we used when we were kids. So, yeah.
Now, is imposter syndrome, dumb question, is imposter syndrome actually like a medical or psychological diagnosis? I had to start there. It's a medical podcast.
Yep,
So,
we're gonna keep it simple. No, it is not a medical diagnosis of any kind. It is just a definition or a term in the dictionary.
and how would you define imposter syndrome? What is your version of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, so imposter syndrome is anytime you feel out of place is in what my mind. But if you're talking in a professional sense, you feel like you are not adequate or you're not up to par with your colleagues is what we were taught in medical school. So sometimes when you are not doing as well on your exams, you feel like you're an imposter. Or maybe once you've graduated and you're now a doctor, you don't feel like you're doing your patients right completely or fully. You feel like your knowledge is still lacking, then you have imposter syndrome. So basically you feel like you're not fitting. It's not necessarily true, reality versus perception, but that's my take on what imposter syndrome is.
I would agree with your definition, but I would add one more thing, at least for me. The other aspect of imposter syndrome is this worry that you're going to be found out. You have that initial feeling of, do I belong? Am I good enough? It's also, are my peers, is my employer, are my friends or family going to find out that I am an imposter? And will I have to pay for that reckoning, for that discovery? That's what leads imposter syndrome to, have additional anxiety, or at least cause additional anxiety, because you feel like you're going to be found out. And that discovery could happen at any given moment, which is kind of terrifying.
Right, right. But there is a benefit from imposter syndrome, or I personally feel like there's a benefit, which is because you are so worried and anxious, you probably are going to double check, triple check your work more often. So, me coming out of residency, I was worried I was going to miss something. So, I was constantly going back, reviewing charts, reviewing notes, making sure that I made the right decisions. I documented everything. I was very particular, and just it was constantly re-looking at the work that I've done to make sure that I was doing it correctly. So I think that is a good proponent, as long as it doesn't get out of hand where you're obsessive about it and then to your detriment, right? Because then there is a con to imposter syndrome is if you truly are faking it till you make it and you do patient harm, then you are in big trouble.
And to add to that, the aspect of imposter syndrome, where if you're faking it till you make like, it all comes with confidence, right? You want to be confident in your education, in your profession, with whatever hobby that you're doing. If you have too much confidence, then that can lead you down a path where you are making those mistakes. But if you have too much imposter syndrome and you're not double checking yourself and you're just constantly worried and constantly anxious, you could also be making mistakes. It can be a double-edged sword. You mentioned we all experience imposter syndrome. When do you think was your first memory of really feeling like an imposter in an area?
I would say the earliest where it was most impactful was when I actually moved from Chicago down to
Mhm.
Texas. One, it's a completely new place. Two, it was a completely new environment, social environment, but also cultural change for me. So I had grew up in inner city Chicago where we had a lot of Asians around. So a lot of like colored, skin colored. We spoke all the same language. Like we all were bilingual. So that was all something that I was very comfortable with was coming down to Texas. One, did not know what to expect, but two, it was much more Caucasian dominant. So when I got down here, I always felt out of place. I always felt like I did not fit in. Of course, now looking back, I don't think anyone truly cared or understood that at that time. All we want to do is survive school, graduate high school, and move on. But there were moments in time where I felt like when I was hanging out with my friends who were predominantly Caucasian, you just felt out of place a little bit.
I bet there are a lot of immigrants or individuals from other cultures that aren't predominantly white that feel that way, especially when you're moving from one place that's so urban to Texas, which is a little bit more rural. We've talked about this before. I remember being in Chicago and my parents would take us to all the different neighborhoods. It was a melting pot and we got to experience that. But when we finally came here to Texas, it was completely different. So you're trying to find your way and find your space in just something that's a different world.
Right. I wouldn't even call Texas rural. Yes, there are areas that are rural, but where we landed, right? So where our Fort Worth, it's more suburban. But
Yeah.
even that is very different from inner city Chicago, where everything's on top of each other. That dynamic is was drastic. It was drastic change. I don't know if that's what you remember at all. If that's how you felt coming. I mean, obviously, you look more Caucasian. You are half Caucasian, so
I am. My dad's German and Polish. My mom's Colombian and Italian, and my mom is actually from Colombia, South America. It was weird because when we moved here, I just was trying to find my place and I got really anxious. I remember being very nervous before going to school in the fifth and sixth grade, where I would sometimes even get in like these shaking fits because I was so worried about walking in and not knowing people. I don't know if you remember, but in school, if you had gotten there before like the certain bell, you had to go into the gym and you had to sit down in rows with your classes. And that's how they would organize you before school started. And I was terrified of that. Maybe it was more so my introvert coming out. Maybe I was shy. So I don't know if you would necessarily call that imposter syndrome, but there is definitely anxiety as to how am I going to fit in? How am I going to make friends? So on and so forth.
so you just said something that surprised me is you said you were an introvert. I'm shocked that you were ever an introvert because from my perspective, I always felt like you were a total extrovert and you were all of these different groups, friend groups and cliques. And so I guess now I'm curious to find out when did you and how did you overcome that introvertedness and what brought you out of it and what helped you out of it? Because that helps you overcome that imposter syndrome too, is that
Mhm.
you can embrace that quality.
I'm definitely an introvert, although most people that I meet in a social setting would say that I'm an extrovert. Uh, I was talking to a very good friend of mine over the weekend, and he's also an introvert. And we were talking about how when people look at us and they say, "You're an extrovert, how are you so extrovert if you're an introvert?" And it's almost like this chameleon act that you have to put on where you learn from a social dynamic what you need to do to fit in, to be liked, to enjoy people's presence and have them enjoy your presence, as well as work the system a little bit. The individuals that sit back and don't communicate or are a little bit more reserved. I'm not saying they can't be successful in life because I mean some of the most successful people are pure introverts, but it definitely doesn't help when you're trying to expand a business or learn how to speak to somebody or be a lawyer or be a doctor, which is very front facing to people. You're not working behind a computer all day. You have to be with people. So I think that what I had to learn was this chameleon aspect that came, I think, with sports. I think sports was a big one. When you start playing sports at a young age, you're forced to be on a team, communicate with the 5 to 15 people on your team, get yelled at by coaches, get yelled at by parents. It starts brushing away that introvertedness and forces you into the moment. Or at least that's where it probably started for me.
Do you have like an age or when you felt like you were no longer an imposter in that realm, like in that socialization realm? I mean, I personally still, you put me into a social setting and we're out having cocktails with my colleagues. I'm still that awkward elementary kid, like trying to have a conversation, trying to find that commonality. I still absolutely feel like an imposter. So for you, who you're so adept at navigating those social circles, when did you feel you overcame that imposter syndrome from that specific scenario?
I still haven't overcome it. There are still moments in time, and people wouldn't believe me if I said this. I still get panic attacks. I still get anxiety attacks. Sometimes, if I'm in an awkward social situation, my wife makes fun of me, I will start sweating because I can't escape it. And once I start realizing that I'm sweating, I start sweating some more. And it comes and goes. And it comes and goes with certain situations and the people that are around and being comfortable. I think that My wife jokes, like, my worst case scenario is seeing somebody I know out in, nature, out in the real world that I haven't talked to in 10 years, and you'll start seeing me sweating just because it's an awkward social situation. I learned how to start dealing with that when we were in college because with us going to Texas, how come there were 50,000 people and they came from all walks of life. And you had to really start figuring out your peers and how to communicate, even more so than you have to in high school. That started brushing away my introvertedness because when you're in high school, you've already been in school with some of these people. I mean, you and I had already been in school together for almost a decade.
Mm.
So even if you're not friends with somebody, you've had an interaction with them. You've communicated in some sense, whether you were friends or you guys were partners on an assignment. So you're able to brush that aside. And as you got closer to senior year, you knew everybody in your school. You knew what everybody did and what they brought to the table. College was starting over and starting over completely because you didn't have mom and dad there to tell you this is the way you should act. You didn't have your teachers that you had known forever, or your friends that you had known forever. Um, but yeah, that's when I started. What about you? When do you feel like you started? Because you made a transition. We've talked about before. You made an insane transition to, even though you're talking about being nervous, you, I feel like, are truly an extrovert because you genuinely enjoy hanging out with people.
I guess I do enjoy hanging out with people I want to hang out with, which is hard because the people I want to hang out with are so limited in time. It's hard to actually find time with them.
Right.
But you're right. I found my footing when I felt less like an imposter it was probably after everyone had graduated college and I was the only one left over doing my fifth year alone. That really opened my eyes up to how much I had already learned from you guys, how much new social skills I had already gained from those first 4 years, whether that was at football games, going to the sporting events, apartment parties, whatever it was. I was able to pull in all of those skills and utilize them in my fifth year as a solo person going out and trying to make new friends, which is crazy to think back now because it's actually even harder now to use those skills to make new friends because everyone's kind of in their own bubble and they have all these responsibilities. For me, imposter syndrome from a social aspect, I think really dissipated or lessened that fifth year of college. And it only got better as I gained more knowledge and more expertise. Cause then I felt not that I felt important, but I felt I had more of a say. I had something worth listening to, you know?
Yeah. I hearing you say that it puts my imposter syndrome, or at least my social anxiety, whatever you want to call it, into perspective. I feel like maybe mine came with chapters of life, or as some people like to call them, seasons of life. So it was the move to Texas. Everything's new, but then you start growing with the people that you're around for a decade, like I had just mentioned. And then you get to UT. And from there, it restarts and you're trying to find your way. And by the time you hit your senior year, or for you, like your fifth year, super senior year, you're so comfortable and confident in what you're doing and what you know and who you are, at least in that chapter, that it dissipates. And then when you hit law school and medical school, at least for me, it restarted. I remember getting to law school and I don't really know anybody. I really maybe knew one other person in college that was going to law school. So it's not like I could really communicate my feelings or my anxiousness or my thoughts with anybody else. I had to find my core group of law school friends to do that, which took a few months because we all show up and everybody's new. The imposter syndrome really started to come out in that first week of orientation into the first day of class, when you start meeting people and you start realizing where people are coming from, where somebody may have come from the Northeast, from an Ivy League. Somebody may have already had several careers and now they're back in law school. Somebody may have gotten their full ride scholarship or was the top of their class at a major university. Some people had already had internships at law firms. And so as I'm sitting here, I know that I'm good enough to be at least in the law school, but I look around, I'm like, okay, these people seem so much more successful than me, and they seem like they got their stuff together, and I'm just trying to wing it right now just to get through. So I don't know if med school, at least the start of med school, felt the same for you or not.
Med school was a struggle for me. So I always like to tell people I have a younger brother, and he's the genius. He's the one with natural sparks. And the only way that I've made it where I've made it is due to purely hard work. So I have to put in more hours, double the hours to study what I need to study to know what I need to know. Whereas there are a lot of higher education people, professions, they are just naturally smart. It just comes easy to them. That's why they succeed so easily. For me, I struggled through that. The first couple of exams, first couple courses, you struggle, and then you think, why am I struggling? I mean, I'm supposed to be the top of the top, right? I graduated at the top of my class in high school. I did fairly well in college. I made it through the admissions part of medical school. I shouldn't be struggling. I should be able to do this easily. But no, you're basically just being compared to the top of the top at that point. So it was always humbling to remind myself of that, is that no matter what happens through school, law school, medical school, even if you are ranked last in the class and you graduate with that diploma, you're still considered a doctor. You're still considered a lawyer. No one's going to ask you what rank you graduated in. They're not going to go back and be like, oh, did you finish at the bottom of your class or the top of your class? It really only matters for the top portion, but the other 90% of people, it doesn't really matter. It never comes up again. That was the only thing that kept that imposter syndrome at bay, but it was always just like right there, ready to boil over at any little chance that it could get.
There's a phrase that comes to mind, and it's be uncommon amongst common men or
Mm,
women, right? And when you're going from university to med school or law school or graduate school, going to go get your MBA or what have you, you've now graduated from being uncommon against the common, right? You're in school with 50,000 people, they all got their bachelors, and now you're uncommon because you're going off and getting your post grad. But how do you be uncommon amongst the uncommon? Because when you get in there, it's like a reset where you're looking at all these other people that were so uncommon and so good at what they were doing that they met the admissions requirements for that same spot, for that same school, that same career, that same job, that same graduate school. And now you're restarting. One of my close friends from my law school family, what we call it, when he came in, he had already been a council member for one of the cities over here at like 18. And so when you hear that story, you're like, "Oh my gosh, you're already in politics. You have been voted into a council by a city at your age, and you did that for the last 4 years." And so you start comparing yourself against those individuals saying, "Okay, what can I bring to the table? What does my experience bring to the table?" And you don't really think about those experiences a lot when you're growing up. I know that our parents force things on us in the sense of, hey, you're going to go to school, you're going to get a degree, you're going to do well at this stuff. But all those other ancillary experiences, we at least, I felt like I didn't have that direction because that wasn't our family's nature. Our family's nature was work hard, do right, be a good person, and good things will come your way. But it wasn't like seek out these side quests that will make you a more unique or uncommon individual.
we kind of discussed the admission part of law school, but for medical school, you have to be well rounded. So that is the uniqueness in my path, is that we had to find other, as you said, side quests, things to accomplish that would make us a well rounded individual. So we couldn't just be all medicine. We had to be maybe athletic, or maybe entrepreneurial, or maybe volunteering and giving back to the community, things like that. So there was always something more that we had to tick off for our application to medical school. And then again, for residencies, there's always room to improve. The one thing that I learned at the very end, probably the last year of medical school, is that you got to stop comparing yourself to the people around you. There's always going to be someone better than you, and there's always going to be people below you, underneath you. It doesn't help anyone for you to try to one up them at all. The only important thing, especially once you get to graduate school, whether you're trying to become a lawyer, an engineer, a physician, is focusing on how much education, how much knowledge can you gain in the short amount of time that you have to study and learn, so that you can do right for your patients, for your clients, for the people that you're going to be interacting with once you're out in the real world. That was the one lesson I wish I had learned earlier in my school year, or in my education, so that I didn't get so anxious and so worried, and that imposter syndrome wouldn't have kept coming up every second of every day, worried that I wasn't in the right place. Maybe I wasn't meant to be a doctor. Maybe I'm not smart enough. I'm not, I can't last to get through it all.
And it's just such a strong point there, because being well rounded is really, really important in anything that you do. And in law school, we've talked about it on, I think, our first or second podcast. It was your LSAT score and your GPA were like two of the most prevalent determining factors. If you had those down, you were pretty much going where you wanted to go. So although the well-rounded would help you make up for a lack of an LSAT score or GPA, the other things would trump well-roundedness. That's not to say that a law school doesn't look for people that are extremely well-rounded. They definitely do, but you can't get into law school just being well-rounded. You need the scores to reflect your ability to succeed. And that LSAT is definitely that. But going through school, by my third year, because law school is 3 years, by my third year, that imposter syndrome definitely started to dissipate with the confidence and the understanding of I've mastered law school. I've mastered this chapter of my life. But then you gear up for the next chapter of your life, which is actually being a lawyer or a physician. And the imposter syndrome definitely comes back because now you're saying, I am one in a sea of professionals. And these professionals are some of the most respected, educated, well rounded, wealthy, to some extent, individuals on this planet. And once you open up that giant category and you're released into that ocean, that's where, for at least me, the imposter syndrome really, really started to come into play. Because everything else is controlled. It's, hey, there's 2,000 people in my school. There's 50,000 people in my school. We're back to there's 200 people in my law school class. And now it's me against everybody that's in this profession.
So bringing back to like that first day of your actual first lawyer gig,
Yeah.
how did you prepare yourself for that first day? Did you bring extra notes? Like, what do you do as a lawyer to prepare yourself so that you're obviously going to walk into your first job on your first day feeling like an imposter? But how do you mitigate that? How do you bring resources to make you feel more confident, or at least exude confidence, so that the person that hired you feels good about hiring you? What did you do?
Well, there was a healthy transition for me because when I had transitioned, I had already been working with this attorney for, the previous 6 or 7 months. I was one of her interns and then I was shadowing her and still helping
You're
out
not
as
talking
I was
about
working
transitioning
more.
genders, right? You're just talking about
No, no,
transitioning.
no. Transitioning from law school to being a lawyer.
Just messing.
But the transition was really comfortable because I knew the expectations and I knew what she was trying to get out of me. We were very clear on what my path would be, and it was a comfortable one for me, at least in the beginning, where hey, you're going to sit back and you're going to learn. I want you to watch and observe. I don't want you to worry about billables. I just want you to understand the dynamic of what we do as lawyers. And the reason that she was so good at mentoring from that position is because that's what her mentor had did for her when she came out of law school. And I felt that that was really important because it made me feel a little bit at ease because I knew I could just take in. I didn't have to interject. I didn't have to say the smart thing at the table. I just had to sit and observe. And I learned a lot from sitting and observing. But when I started being pushed out of my shell to actually do lawyer work, that's when things got a little scary. Here's a funny for everybody out there. I was obviously a divorce attorney and we have to do something called a prove up. So our client was getting divorced. We had to stand with the client in front of the judge and we had to basically read parts of the decree to the judge in front of the client, have the client answer questions. We're proving up the divorce decree, allowing the judge to say, all right, you guys got it. I'm going to sign you off on your divorce decree. And seconds before going in there, my boss handed me a stack of papers and she goes, oh, by the way, you need to give this to the judge. And I had all my notes. I was prepared for the actual prove up portion, but this pack of information, I had no clue what it was. So she's like, you'll be fine. So I walk up to the judge and I'm standing there and I hand it to her and she's looking at me and I'm like, may I begin, Your Honor? And she's like, no, this is wrong. And I think to myself, okay, what's wrong? And she hands it back to me and I start looking through it. There's yes, no's, there's check boxes. I do not know what I'm missing. So I'm and as respectful as I can. Judge, I don't know what I'm missing here. She looks at me, she goes, counsel, I'm not going to do your job for you. And I'm standing in front of our client who is paying a lot of money for us to do this divorce.
Yeah.
Luckily, my mentor had not made it out of the courtroom yet, and she heard what was going on at the bench. And being at the bench is when you essentially go up right in front of the judge's like desk or bench, and you're able to stand right there. So she comes back to the bench. She goes, "I'm so sorry, Your Honor. This is my fault." And she completely owned it. And she circles it, she hands it back. The judge kind of smirks, and then I'm allowed to do my prove up. Prove up goes without a hitch. Divorce decree gets signed. Immediately after that, she looks at the two of us and she goes, "You two in chambers now." And when you hear that from a judge, it basically means you guys need to come back to my back office immediately. We're going to have a chat. So we go back to chambers, and the judge puts the softest smile on her face. And she was actually an alumni of the law school I went to. So she goes, "Now, darling, you know I had to do that to you. I had to teach you a lesson. I need you to come prepared to this courtroom. If you don't know what you're doing, you need to ask your mentor and she'll walk you through it. But you're a representative of this law school. You're a representative of this bar association. You need to come in prepared. If you notice, it wasn't a full courtroom. Just remember for next time." And she let us go. And that was the two sides of it. It was absolutely terrifying, and it was anxiety, and I started sweating, and I didn't know what to do. But there is also a lesson there to be had. And those types of lessons occur many times when you are a baby lawyer learning how to be a full-on professional lawyer that people can trust and rely on.
So sometimes those are like the best lessons. And if not the best lessons, they're the most memorable lessons. It's lessons that you'll never forget because they were so almost traumatic in a sense. Because I can relate to very similar stories in the medical field going into residency. So what stands out from your story is that basically what helped you get over imposter syndrome or help it improve was having the support and the mentorship and someone to help guide you through that early stage.
Yeah.
That's basically what we get as physicians when we go to residency. So we get to go out and practice as a doctor, except not really as a doctor. We're practicing under a doctor that has been out for a long time now. So we are a resident working under an attending. And so we get 3 to 5 years of that period to make those mistakes, ask those stupid questions, see as many cases as you can. But still, I remember every medical student goes through this once they graduate and they start residency that very first year, and that very first patient, which occurs on July 1st. That's when all residencies start. You get that first patient and you have to put it in an order, and it's usually a Tylenol order, and you freak out because then you're like, is this contraindicated in this patient? What dosing should I give? How often should I give it? Are they supposed to be taking meds? Or these are questions that are so easy because Tylenol is something that you can get over the counter. Everyone can just pick it up. But you are the doctor now, that intern, that very first year, that very first day, and you're sitting there worried about Tylenol, giving it to the right person, if it's going to mess up their liver. Is there someone that's going to be screaming at you for giving them a medication they weren't supposed to get? So it's so funny because that is something that it's almost a rite of passage for all medical students and residents to go through, is that putting that very first order in, because if it officially is under your name now, it's tied to you forever. I just thought, as you were telling me that story of you or with the judge and then in that room, I can think of myself back in that patient room and putting in that order in front of them and just struggling. I know this is right, but I'm not quite sure. And I want to call for help, but no one's there to help. So I always made sure that as I became senior, so I, went through second year and third year as a senior, I was actually chief resident. I always made sure to sit down with my interns and help them put in their very first order, no matter what it was, sat down together, did it together. That way, if they ever had any anxiety, we took care of it right then and there. That way, the rest of the day, it was smooth sailing. Mentorship is a very important thing to have as you go through life, as you go through your professional school and your education, to have. But that's where it's going to be hard, is to find the right mentors, right? There are a lot of mentors out there that want to be mentors, but may not be a good fit or have good intentions or even have the right teaching styles that may fit for you in particular.
Oh, completely agree. Completely agree. Having a mentor in anything that you want to do in life it's almost a requirement if you want to be successful. And finding somebody that fits you is also very important. In my stint as a manager at the aerospace company, we had team leads that I worked with all the time, and their job was to help mentor in our stead. So as a manager, when you're dealing with other administrative things, you want a team lead to be able to help bring up the next generation of employees, of analysts, what have you. And I had to explain to them, if you want to be a successful mentor, you have to change your teaching style to help accommodate someone's learning style. Because if you're trying to teach everybody the same way, everybody's not going to learn the same way. You could be the person that only teaches one way, but people aren't going to seek you out. Only the one or two individuals that vibe with what you're doing will seek you out. But if you want to be able to have an impact on everybody, you need to be able to really change your teaching style to make it more conducive with every single person. And if you can do that, you can be a successful mentor. And that's also something that you probably want to seek out in a mentor, because if you can't jive with your mentor, you're not going to learn anything and you're just probably going to be more frustrated than not.
Then once you had your first gig as a lawyer, you pivoted and you changed and you went to work for that what was it, the aerospace company? Yep. So did imposter syndrome come up again, or was that a different career or a different subject that you were comfortable with and didn't wasn't that big of a concern or a transition for you?
It's a very good question. If we go back to why I left the law firm, I left the law firm, I think, because of my imposter syndrome. I felt I wasn't necessarily getting the hang of it. I felt my mentorship was dissipating, but granted, I was growing. And so there's, accountability on both sides. But I was getting to a point where I was looking at my peers and seeing how successful they were. And I was also seeing myself try to battle with keeping up with that success, but also having a good work-life balance. And as a new lawyer, those things don't coexist. You either have to dive all in or you're just not going to get there. And at that point, I really started to look at other options, and it's almost like reverse imposter syndrome, almost like a cockiness that came out when I was looking for other jobs leaving the law firm that were non-lawyer roles. I was thinking to myself, I'm a lawyer. I
Mm.
have savviness in all aspects of not only the law, but business and intellectual property, entertainment, real estate, because law school had taught me, the nuances of these things. And nobody, in applying, nobody would return my phone calls, nobody would return my applications. I just wasn't getting picked for the jobs that I was going after, which I thought I was overly qualified for. And so that started weighing on me, where now I kind of got kick back down of imposter syndrome again, where it's like, okay, well, maybe I'm not as well rounded as I thought I was. I'm just a lawyer. And in this sea of the entire workforce, where I'm trying to go corporate and not in-house counsel, but just work for a corporation in any capacity, now I'm competing against all these people that's always been their goal. And that was a step towards, I guess, back towards imposter syndrome. So when I got selected for this role, which was evaluating, negotiate government contracts, I went back into a little bit of imposter syndrome, where I was confident in my ability to learn the role. I was confident in my work ethic because I'd already shown that going through law school and being a lawyer. But now it was something completely different, where I'm looking at individuals that had been out of college for 2 years and been in this role for 2 years, and they are mentoring me. And I am almost a 30-year-old that's a lawyer, and I have somebody with a supply chain degree who's been out for 2 years walking me through the basics of what I'm doing. But I learned early, at least in law school, in order to be successful at anything when you're new to it, you need to fall on your sword. You need to admit to everybody that you are new, you do not understand, and you're here to work hard and learn. And so I took that same approach in the new job, and it ended up being super successful for me. It was really something that I was able to lean on and rely on. Does that work the same way in medicine? Do people expect you, at least in the industry, not your patients, obviously, but the people in the industry that you're working with, do they expect you to fall on your sword and admit that you're just a new physician trying to figure out? Or is there an expectation that you guys run through with the confidence of a seasoned physician?
Yes and no. It depends. Lawyer talk, right? It
Okay.
depends. The majority of the time when we graduate residency, we are supposed to be the team lead in any medical scenario it is, whether we're working in the hospital or the clinic. Everyone always looks to the physician to make that final decision. So whether you're a new graduate or not, everyone around you is still going to look up to you for that. If we're on a plane and it's going down, they're going to look for the physician to determine like who's healthy, who's not, what are we going to do, what are we going to do with these injuries? There's always that pressure and that responsibility, but staying humble and allowing people to understand that yes, they are looking up to you as the leader, but even a leader cannot always know everything, that there are always going to be shortcomings. There are things that we don't know and that we are going to reach out for help, only creates a more cohesive and strong team that will then support your patients better. That was the one thing I learned in my first job. I was scared. Even though I had made these decisions so many times under the supervision of my attending physician in residency, I was now making it on my own, and you always second guess yourself. But the more times that I made those decisions, it became more and more comfortable. Even to this day, I'm now 5 years into practice. There are still certain decisions that if I don't normally make, I still hesitate. But as I continue to make those decisions more and more, or I begin to prescribe more and more of this specific medication, then I become more comfortable. Imposter syndrome is always going to be there. It's whether or not you have the tools, the mindset to make sure that you get over it, but get over it safely and then utilize it in a positive way, right? To your benefit,
Mhm.
not to your detriment.
Yeah, that resonates because going back to aerospace, my first negotiation, it was a $20 million proposal and contract that we were negotiating. And my mentor at the time said, "All right, they're here on site, go negotiate it." And I said, "But wait, I need help." He goes, "What do you mean you need help?" I go, "I don't know how to negotiate this thing." He goes, "Nick, you're a lawyer. You've been negotiating longer than most of us have even been in this job. You'll be fine." And that was kind of like the push in the right direction. I'm not an imposter. I know what I'm doing. I have the confidence. Why am I freaking out? And so at that point, I started really gaining the confidence and I got my promotions. But now looking back at certain points in my career with that company as a team lead, as a manager, there are points where I look back and I'm like, who was I to make that call? Who was I to make that decision? I was in some instances acting so cocky or so not humble that I probably came off with a negative impact or I basically came off as an asshole probably to some people because I let my cockiness and my confidence kind of overtake. And granted, it ebbs and flows. Looking back at my career, I was able to bring it back down once I was accountable and acknowledge what was going on. And I got feedback from my team and from my leaders. Feedback is also a wonderful tool. You should always seek out feedback from individuals because it could help. But again, the imposter syndrome ebbs and flows because if you're too, to your point, if you're too confident and too cocky, that's where some issues can really come, where people are looking at you for decisions. Sometimes it can give you kind of a God complex. Of course, you guys are looking to me for decisions because I am the one person in this room that can answer that question. When really, you probably don't have any business answering that question, or at least being as confident as you are.
Right. Well, is there anything you are currently feeling like you're an imposter in, like anything in the present day? This will be the last thing that we'll touch base in to see if we can close this conversation down. But is there anything currently right now?
I'm going to ask you the same exact question. And it's different for you because you've been a professional in your career for so long that you continue to gain that confidence while remaining humble. But for me, I experience imposter syndrome. I'm an adjunct professor, and at the law school, I am responsible for coaching teams in our ADR program, which is alternative dispute resolution, mediations, negotiations, arbitrations, that sort of thing. And whenever I meet with my students, I know I have the ability to coach them in how to negotiate effectively. It's one of my favorite things to do. I would say I can put on a master class of negotiations. But when they're talking about other aspects of the law, I've been removed from a practicing attorney for so long that there are things that these law students discuss, Supreme Court cases and precedent and theories that I've completely forgotten about. So in some instances, I start feeling like an imposter because I've forgotten these things that most seasoned lawyers know like the back of their hand. It's just because my direction has been different. My path has been different where I have more knowledge about certain things that they don't have that's non-legal related, but a little bit of imposter syndrome will come out there because I'm the adjunct professor, but I still have forgotten some of the legalese and stuff like that because I just don't use it every day. And then when we transition into our companies, I'm currently doing real estate investing and it's another new chapter. I'm sitting with investors, I'm sitting with realtors, I'm sitting with contractors and I'm trying to fake it until I make it, but also stay humble and also fall on my sword. But so I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome when I go throughout my days trying to talk to somebody that I may not know what they're trying to communicate, but in order to gain some respect in the industry, especially locally, I have to try to come across like I'm intelligent and educated on the topic. That way somebody doesn't look past me as a potential partner. So yeah, I still experience it. Again, chapters of my life. I'm sure it'll get better as I get more confident. What about you? Are you experiencing imposter syndrome with anything?
Absolutely. Actually, this podcast, right?
Really?
When we first started it, I told you my hesitation. I told you my insecurities. And it was so nice to have someone to bounce those ideas off of, not to either bring me up or bring me down, but just to get that feedback, like you said, getting that affirmation, that confirmation that, hey, we can do this. But I think it made it easier. I still have that imposter syndrome. We're putting ourselves out there to the public. We have no idea who's going to be watching these videos, who is going to judge us based on how we sound, how we look, how we're dressed. There's just so many things that the internet and social media can nitpick at us. It always worries me. But the second layer to that is that we have our own personal careers, right? Our primary careers it's not doing the podcast. I mean, it's something that we really enjoy doing, but our primary careers, our primary income is in a different scenario, and this podcast potentially could affect that. And so it's always worries me that whatever I say might impact my other job or my personal life. There's just so many different things that can occur while we're doing this. But again, I'm glad I'm doing it with you, and I'm glad that we have ideas that we can bounce back and forth. One of these days, we'll post some bloopers and just the conversations that we have behind the scenes, bouncing topics, ideas, how we're going to move and flow through the conversation. It's just really eye opening to be able to have someone beside me doing this, even though I'm scared. Even though I'm worried, but at the end of the day, it's really exciting and really fun, and that's why I'm happy to continue doing it. Right. So far, we've had quite a bit of growth in terms of views
Yep.
on our channel, both on YouTube and Spotify. So I'm really happy with the growth that we've made so far. And believe it or not, at this point, we should probably have already had almost 10 or 11 episodes out. That would have mean we would have had at least 3 months of videos out, and I'm sure it would have grown more than what we're seeing now as we're recording it. So it's just really cool to see that growth, and that again brings me back to those life lessons through medical school, through residency, is that don't compare yourself to any others. It doesn't really matter what others think. You just make sure that you focus in on yourself and your journey, do what you can, learn what you can, and put out into the world what you want to put out. And hopefully it affects a good change. And that's what we're hoping
I
to do with our podcast.
That's a strong message, and I just want to ask you one more question before we end, because I feel this way. Based on the podcast, this is pure imposter syndrome. We aren't the number one lawyer and number one doctor in the industry, and I've always felt this way about the podcast. And again, we've talked about this, where we're going to be judged by our peers, by our industry peers, by our friends, by the individuals we went to school with, and I always wonder, how are they going to judge us from an attorney who has not practiced law for a decade but has had many experiences and is still attached to the legal field, being an adjunct professor? How am I going to be judged by our listeners? Is it going to be hey, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about because he's been out for so long, or hey, he only practiced for 3 years, he hasn't earned his stripes? I'm hoping that we can add enough value in our discussions that that's not a topic that people concern themselves with. But do you feel similarly with the physicians and the medical staff and the nurses and everybody else that you encounter on a day-to-day basis? Do you feel like there's going to be some of that judgment?
Absolutely. That's with anything that we do, right? There's always someone judging. But that's the thing, is that as long as we stick within our knowledge base, our not necessarily our lane, but within the confines of what we personally know and experience. And if we don't know something, we at least have the ability to go out and research and learn more and be knowledgeable. And the thing that I'm really excited about is bringing on experts so that we could ask those questions, right? That will be a really big step up, is the day that we have our first guests on, so that we can ask these questions, an expert in whatever field they are in. But that's where our growth will be looking towards. So I'm really excited. Yes, I absolutely am worried about those things. That's why it's so nice to have a partner in this, and that we bounce these ideas off. And if we do find each other maybe saying the wrong thing or maybe bringing up the wrong topic, at least we're able to correct each other and catch our mistakes before anything gets posted. Hopefully nothing gets posted.
Yeah.
Hopefully we don't have to do like an apology video one day.
Not medical or legal advice. Remember that, everybody. Not medical or
Exactly.
legal advice.
Exactly. But that's a great place to end this episode on the Medical Legal Brief, where medicine meets law. Dr. Long, or Dr. Long and lawyer Nik. If you like what you heard and saw, please follow us, share it, comment, interact with us in our communities, whether you're on social media, on Instagram, Spotify, YouTube. Just connect with us in any of those areas, okay? We will respond to you for sure. But that's it for us today. We'll see you next time.
Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we're lawyers. No, this podcast is not medical or legal advice. Do not take anything we say as a reason to perform your own heart surgery, represent yourself in court, or diagnose your neighbor's rash. This is for entertainment only. Think of it like hanging out with your smartest, wittiest friends, not a substitute for an actual appointment. If you act on anything we say without talking to your own professional, that's on you. Seriously, don't do that.